Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today, Peer Wellness Specialist Training and Introduction, presented by Robyn Priest. And we have special guests, Jamie Becker, Joanna Rios, and Tanya Thomas. Please note that this presentation is made possible by grant funding from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. This recording will be available as soon as we get everything processed, and just look into our website and you'll see a link available. If you have questions during the presentation, please type them in the chat feature, and Robyn will address them as soon as she's available. With no further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Robyn.
Good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are in the country. So, my name is Robyn Priest, and I'm the lead project coordinator for Peerlink National Technical Assistance Centre, and I want to welcome everyone on here. How we're going to work today is I'm going to give you an overview of the Peer Wellness Specialist training as it is currently, and then we're going to have Tanya Thomas and Joanna Rios, who have just completed the training in Nevada, speak about their experiences and what they got out of it. And then Jamie Becker is going to come on. And Jamie was a participant in North Dakota, and then we wanted to encourage co-facilitation. So Jamie co-facilitated in Nevada and is going back and taking the training back up to North Dakota. So that's how it's going to go. Again, if you've got questions, just type them into the chat bar, and what I'll do after the presentation is we'll go to those questions and answer them for you. So in terms of a background, originally it was developed, the Peer Wellness Specialist training was developed as a 10-day peer specialist certification training in Oregon. And Peerlink are currently working with a number of states. We're working with North Dakota, Montana, and Nevada, and decided that it would be good if we could deliver that training into those states. Now, because of the rurality and having to go to those states and the cost of traveling, we turned it into a 4.5-day training for the states that we supported. And we moved some stuff around in the original training so that there was a little bit more of a introduction to peer support on the first day before we got into some of the other stuff. We also wanted to make sure that states didn't become reliant on other people coming in to run training for them. So we developed this process that we would deliver it in a particular state and then find out if there was someone from that state who would like to be a facilitator. Now, it would be great if we could have 2 facilitators in each of the states, but we didn't have the funding to be able to bring 2 facilitators to train them up. So Jamie from North Dakota was the successful applicant. We paid all her expenses to come down to Nevada and do that. So next time we deliver this training in one of the states that we're supporting, or anyone else, we'll be asking someone from Nevada to apply to become a facilitator and then train them up, so that way states become self-sufficient and are able to continue training in their states. So kind of an overview of the course. I want to talk through some of the kind of general things that we've done in it so you get a sense of it. Bear in mind that all the way through the training, it's building every day into the skills that we require. So although there may be topics that don't specifically talk about health, we're continually talking about that kind of process in there. So we wanted to start off the training with really hitting home the values, because one of the things that we see across the world, and as you can tell, I'm not just from the US, this is the 4th country I've been involved in peer support in, and there's commonly issues where it's hard to stay true to the peer values at times, depending on where we're delivering the service. Sometimes when we go into mainstream services, they don't quite understand exactly how peer support works and may try and ask us to do things that are not quite peer support. So the big kind of value behind this training is a bit of a foundation of where we came from, so that people can get that it's a disservice if we move away from those values. So we try and keep very true to that, continually discussing that throughout the training. We start off doing some reframing recovery exercises, and this is where we really kind of push some people's buttons. And I guess at the start of the training, we do a discomfort agreement, and I want to thank the IPS Intentional Peer Support guys for the idea of a discomfort agreement, where we ask people to grow out of their comfort zone, and if they feel a little bit uncomfortable, just to sit with it and see if they can move through it. So we do some activities where we're asking people about their thoughts about recovery, why they believe some people can or can't recover, and we also kind of start talking about what sometimes people call as symptoms versus life situations. And we do actually in the training put up some people who are kind of high profile, and before we show their picture, just put up what we could describe as symptoms. And we look at kind of reframing that for people. We also do some work looking at people's hidden strengths, and just really start to challenge the perception of like, is it a symptom? Is it general life? Is it something we can work through? And it's kind of interesting to hear people move through that and get aha moments. So that's kind of where we start. And then we do a history of the movement, and we kind of get going. We discuss, we do talk about where AA came from, in the 30s and that kind of process. And we take a bit of a deeper look at the 1950s and onwards, and talk about the principles that have occurred in mental health through that time and where our movement, and we talk about the CSX movement as the Consumer Survival Ex-Patient movement, and how that came to fruition and where that's taking us now, and linking it into the fact that it's actually a civil rights movement. What we're doing with trying to have the slogan, nothing about us without us, is that kind of piece that any of the civil rights movement, whether it's African Americans moving through, whether it's LGBTQI, whether it's women, we've all kind of come through that process of saying we want to be a part of this and determine where we go. From there we move into some peer support fundamentals, and we have like a long discussion about language, because if we're working in peer services, we generally have, although not always, generally have pretty good language. But sometimes working in mainstream services, and I want to make it clear, I think we need peer support all over the place. But sometimes languaging isn't always thought about at the same extent that it is in peer-run services. So we have a conversation about reframing language and how our job as peer supporters is to kind of go in there and respectfully challenge. The guys in the training probably tell you about how I respectfully challenge them, but to continue to respectfully challenge language. We talk about the peer support definitions, we talk about the values implicit in our work, and we have a lengthy conversation about what peer support is and what it isn't. Because sometimes, people who haven't done training before have a certain perception about what it might look like, and we talk about, moving away from it, doing things for people to allowing them to do them for themselves. We do some basic communication, and again, we're always in the process of talking about health through this. So we just do lots of fun exercises around that. We go into talking about problem solving, and in this training we use something called PICBA, which is a certain way of going about it. So it's just, what's the problem, what's the impact, what's the cost, what's the benefit, and I've changed this up a little in the training recently, what's the benefit of getting rid of the problem, but what is the benefit to us keeping it? Because we often only keep things that have a benefit, and we don't often look at that. And it was really interesting in the trainings that we've done where people start to see why sometimes they do keep things around. It's brainstorming and then an action. We also go through some exercises on managing conflict. One of the exercises we do there is we ask people to talk about what does trigger them when they're in a discussion with someone, and we kind of get them to play that out in silly ways to the point, hopefully, where people aren't as triggered by that kind of process for them. We then go into the stages of change, and we align the kind of theoretical models of stages of change from De Clemente and Francesca into what is it in terms of mental health and addictions, and mapping it all kind of together there. We have put in motivational interviewing into this training now, because although it started as a provider tool, so it was used in therapy, one of the things that we've noticed is that it's actually kind of consistent with how we do things in peer support. And a couple of months ago, I was working with a psychiatrist and doing some training in Canada in terms of getting services into a more recovery-focused way of working. And she kept saying to me, the way you keep talking is motivational interviewing. And I actually hadn't taken much of a look at it before, but since then I've seen that there's stuff occurring, there's webinars occurring and information coming out saying motivational interviewing and peer support. So take a look at that. It's just a framework, as in any of this. This is purely a framework, and any single person can take bits on or not take bits on. So we're not saying you have to do this. I'm just saying it's an interesting tool. We go into advocacy, and, we talk about systemic and individual advocacy, and not doing for someone, but doing with someone. And I'm not going into the whole basics of what we're doing, because I think the best content is hearing from the people who have done the training. We move into a section on trauma-informed peer support. And I guess here we start talking about some of the prevalence of trauma and health and the impacts of that. And it's been particularly eye-opening for many of the participants who, although they've had their own kind of histories with trauma, haven't thought of it in terms of the larger picture and the amount of people that actually have trauma that we're working with. We talk through some of the survival mechanisms that people use, and, the discussion about moving the question, going from a kind of medical model to a trauma-informed, where we're going from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. We also do a bit of an exploration in terms of where people currently get traumatized in the system. So we do an exercise where we start to look at the system currently in whatever state we're in, and look at where do people get traumatized by our system, and what are the things that we can do to start moving that system of care so that it's not as traumatizing. And certain states are much further ahead than others in terms of looking at that. So it's all of this training, although we have a particular way of doing it, it then becomes personalized to the particular state that we're working in. We then talk about a number of what we term recovery, resilience, and wellness models, and we go through some of the kind of standard ones, the RAP, the WHAM, so Wellness Recovery Action Plan, I'm using acronyms, Whole Health Action Management. We talk about nutrition and exercise and wellness, one called NUR, which has free videos online. We talk about Money Basics, which is about financial self-sufficiency, and you can go to the Peerlink website and get information on that. We talk about the Hearing Voices Network and Will Hall's Harm Reduction Guide to Coming Off Psychiatric Drugs. So we give people a mixture in here to think about. And one of the things that we really push home in this training is that it's about self-care and wellness for the people that we're supporting. Because if we're not taking care of ourselves as peer workers, we're actually not going to be any use at all to the people that we're supporting. So we really do some exercises around there where people start to look at that and think about it themselves. And sometimes people haven't thought about that, as much as maybe it would be useful to do. We then start getting into some of the really specific kind of health pieces. So all the way through the training we've been incorporating health, but we start to bring in some of the more kind of statistical and different things. So we talk about health across the lifespan. And we start talking about life expectancies and causes of death, specific issues within our sector. And there are 5 chronic diseases that have a bigger impact in our sector that we start to talk through. So we do some more work on things like heart conditions, diabetes, those kind of things that have an impact on us, and we provide some tip sheets for working with people who have those kind of conditions and get people to kind of really explore where the resources are and how they might be able to support them. Because unfortunately, people who have mental health and co-occurring disorders often have some of the higher chronic diseases that come with that as well. We then have discussions around the traditional system, where we, give people discussions around Medicare and Medicaid, talk about the Affordable Health Care Act, private insurances, and we also have a discussion in there about the other kinds of traditional, like regular doctors and some of the mental health providers and so forth. But we really take a look at that and how, as a peer support worker, we might need to know some of that information and how to link people with different places in that. And again, it's only a 4.5-day training, so we provide further resources that people can go into to really take a look at. And then we get into some of the discussion around health and wellness and navigating the system. So we do work around working with multidisciplinary teams, the alternative health care. So depending on where you come from, there may be some great alternative health care options that providers, or people who are paying for services are willing to look at. We do stuff around community resources and really take a look at what's in the local area. So we bring a training that's kind of generic and then hone into what's that look like locally. And there's also an exercise in there where we get people to start to look at where they're holding on to potentially some resentment, where they've dealt with providers, different providers before for themselves or for others who they believe may have wronged them, and it's about doing an exercise where we hope they actually let that go. And there's a place where we write letters and either throw them away, or in some countries I have actually had people burn them, but in this country where we're a little bit more scared of fires and liabilities, we tend to throw it away. And you don't have to. If you want to hold on to whatever it is, you don't have to. But one of the pieces about that exercise is getting a sense that if we've got resentment about certain providers, then it's very hard to kind of work in that multidisciplinary team and work in a collaborative way. And one of the things I did forget to say in terms of when we were talking about the recovery piece, like when we talk to the peers in the training, we're talking about, we want to be in a place where we believe recovery is for everyone. Everyone can recover. Well, we want to be in that same place for providers. We want to say that the system can recover, and every part of the system can. Because if we're coming from a context that, that's never going to get better, then we're not actually any better than some of the people who work with us and say, well, you can't get better. It can only be, a certain thing. So, we need to take a look at that and be in a place that we're in the space that everyone can recover and every system can. And you can take it on board or not. So the other place that we go is we also do health, social awareness, and cultural knowledge. So we start looking at those cultural pieces to see how they all connect, and we talk about social determinants of health and how we might be able to go with that. So, and we start talking about the culturally and linguistically appropriate standards. So there's some federal standards that many states are starting to pick up, and services are just starting to look at some of those now. And we do a pretty interesting exercise in there where we're doing a checking your biases exercise and kind of really push buttons on people. And maybe the couple of people who are like talking after can give you their experience of that, but it really does poke people's, it's designed to bring up people's prejudices. I can give you one example. We have an example where people work in threes, and we have some person who's the peer, a person who's the peer worker, and we have an observer. And the peer worker, all they know is they're supporting someone for, say, employment. And the peer gets a slip of paper as to who they're going to act out. And one of the situations is the peer is a person who appears to be drunk, but they don't drink. It's just part of what's happening for them. And many times I've seen people go straight to, oh, have you been drinking? How much have you been drinking? And it's designed to really push those buttons to see where we go, what our go-to automatics are. And so we have a bit of fun with that. And I do warn people at the start it's designed to push their buttons. And then we go into health promotion and talking about how do we do health promotion and linking with culture. We then have an kind of afternoonish session going through person-directed planning. And we utilize a specific framework, and it's up on your presentation here, where we get people to look at what's the story of the person that they're talking with, exploring the strengths and gifts for that person, what works and what doesn't work, going into their dreams and possibilities, and what are the action steps. But we really get the participants to go through that process, and that we only do it in a short period of time, but that process out in the real world could be a conversation over a month. It could be a number of conversations. And why do we talk about our story? Because often in our story we've got the strengths and gifts in there, but we may not be able to see them for ourselves. So we get the participants of the training to really kind of explore into that. And then on the last morning, we start talking about responsibilities and conduct. So we talk through ethics and morals and boundaries, and being a professional as a peer supporter. And I don't step back from that. We are a professional, and we need to act as professionals just like anyone else that is a professional in their role. And when we act as professionals, we start to get treated as professionals. When we act in an entitled way, and it should be different because we're a peer, that's the place we start to have people change things and put things in job descriptions or whatever that aren't conducive to us being professionals. I have seen a job description recently that in terms of the abilities that a peer worker must have is to keep their house clean and stay on their treatment plan. Now, I'm working with the place that has that, but I think part of why we've had things like that step in is, one, people don't understand the true role of being a peer support worker, and I call myself a peer professional, but also sometimes as peers we might think that things should be a little different for us. And so I don't step back from saying if we're not doing our job and can't do our job, we need to look at that. And maybe it's not the right job, and it's not just about I'm a peer. So we do have very lengthy discussions around that. And then the other piece, I just went forward one extra one. One of the things that we do is something called a designer activity. And this is, we put this in because we want participants to have self-determination for themselves in their training. So on the Thursday afternoon, we ask participants to tell us what topics they want further work on. And then the facilitators in that evening go out and have to design extra activities to really bring home those skills. So not only do we talk about self-determination in terms of wanting to support peers, but we're also doing it in our training and saying, you tell us what you want and we'll go away and design something. So hopefully the guys further on will kind of have a conversation about this. And then we just do an overview and a closing of it, and we celebrate that people have gone through that. Because if you've been in an entire week of training, you know that it can get a bit stressful at times. So that's how the training has kind of gone over those 4.5 days. Just need to give you a heads up that Jamie Becker sent me a little information just to myself that they've got a bomb threat and she's had to evacuate. So I'm going to see if she can, while she's evacuating, call in on her cell phone at some point, but she may not be able to be with us due to a bomb threat. Who would have thought there was a bomb threat in Bismarck, North Dakota? But anyway, I'm going to move it on to Tanya Thomas now, one of the participants from Nevada, and let her have a discussion, and she can tell you about herself and anything from there. So thanks, Tanya.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. As you said, my name is Tanya Thomas. I was one of the participants in the Nevada training. I began the training kind of excited but really unsure of the expectation of it, but I was definitely pleasantly surprised. It was not only engaging, but it definitely kind of forced everyone to come out of their comfort zone by participating in group activities, role-playing, and kind of really learning quite an in-depth amount of information about the role in itself. I think some of the important things that it focused on was the empowerment of peers and how to empower those that we work with versus enabling. And just a few things to name, basically making the peers' needs basically the focus as opposed to what we think they need. Basically learning how to support them and communicate in a way basically based on the person that you're working with, making sure that they're fully understanding everything that you're doing, that you're there to support them, taking the time to ensure that they understand what you're saying, and definitely using the effective listening and motivational interviewing. I believe the training opportunity allowed me to fully express my thoughts and enhance my confidence level and definitely bring me out of my comfort zone. And the role-playing definitely was a great way to definitely kind of basically practice the real-life situations that you may encounter when working with peers. So you're not only just reading in a book of what to expect, you're actually acting some of those things out and actually basically learning basically what can happen when you're working with others. And definitely some of the things that really stood out to me were the person-directed planning, which was a great way, basically something that you can use when you're working with peers and basically motivating and supporting them and kind of building them up and empowering them to go out and strengthen and build themselves up.
Okay, so thank you, Tanya. I'm Joanna Rios, and I was also a participant in this last training. And I have to tell y'all, when I was asked to speak on the webinar, I was asked to share things that I found to be very beneficial to me, or to maybe share, as Robyn mentioned earlier, any aha moments. So my response to that was, how long do I get? Isn't the webinar only an hour long? Because that is just how much I got out of this.
Hey, Joanna, Jamie can't be on, so you can have longer now if you want.
But no pressure, right? So Tanya alluded to some of this and spoke about some of this, so I apologize if I'm repeating. But some of the things that were really, really important to me I found the whole training from the very first minute to the very last minute to be extremely beneficial and eye-opening on many, many levels. And I've been working in this field for many years as well. And as I'll tell you in a little bit, there were a couple areas where I even said to Robyn, oh, I think I have this one down. And then she'd say something and I'd go, oh, wait a second. So the most important part, I think, the one thing that stands out the most, and we can never say this enough, is the person-directed component. I think all of us that work in this field know that it should be person-directed. Any type of peer support should be person-directed, but I'll give you an example. Let's say, and I work in a drop-in center, so let's say someone comes into my drop-in center where I work and says, I'm homeless and I need help. Before taking this training, my first thought, and truly something I would have been hyper-focused on, would have been, oh my gosh, I've got to find this person housing. I've got to help this person, get resources for housing. Before even, asking many more questions like, is housing something you really want? You may have said to me you're homeless, but you didn't say to me, I'm homeless, I need a place to stay. So it really kind of made me step back and think, and I've had this instance where sometimes we have folks come in and I just naturally assume what it is they need based on, the first couple of sentences that they give me. So one of the things that the training does is it really reminds us to really use our listening skills and remember that it has to be person-directed. And in this case, maybe this person, their greatest need in life is income, whether that be Social Security or a part-time job or whatever that may be. And there may be a couple of obstacles in the way, but housing is not one of them as far as they're concerned. So again, it just really encourages you to listen and remember to keep everything person-directed. So moving forward, the exercises were phenomenal. And I know that some people, when they go to trainings like this, we hear lots of grumbling. As a matter of fact, I was one of them, and I tend to be a really animated person. But I was like, oh, I don't want to role play. But they were really just so helpful. And people that I knew in this training, being that it was all folks from my state that are part of Pure Alliance of Nevada, I knew quite a few of them. Some of the folks that are typically pretty quiet were able to really, really open up and be incredibly helpful and motivational during these exercises. So if they hadn't been a part of it, maybe we wouldn't have seen that in them and in ourselves. And I heard Robyn mention a couple of times pushing buttons and getting people out of our comfort zones. And I think, Tanya, you mentioned that as well. Yeah, they did. They pushed our buttons, and they pushed us out of our comfort zones for sure. And our beliefs were definitely respectfully challenged. But I have to tell you, I find myself respectfully challenging others every day since this training. And it's in a way that when we were in the training, it was done in such a way that it really promoted growth and empowerment. It wasn't something, you may have had a little feeling in your gut, like, oh, that might be a little too far for me, or I might be a little stuck in this. But it was really, really helpful. So we started the training with a bang, and I think I told you all that every minute for me was just beneficial. It truly was. I tend to be a doodler just because I get lost in trainings a little bit. That just tends to be who I am, and I think I took out my doodle pad for about 10 minutes the whole training. And that's really saying a lot for me. But we started off with something that I found to be fascinating, which was basically the question of, recovery. Who can recover? under what circumstances, and there were all these scenarios that were presented to us, and it was interesting to watch everybody react and discuss and talk about that. And again, remembering that this is all person-directed, and recovery has to be person-directed as well. So a few of the things that really, really stood out for me were PICBA, and Robyn mentioned that earlier, which is something that I am now currently using, not only personally, but also with a couple folks here that I work with on a regular basis. But PICBA, once again, was you present a problem, or somebody presents a problem, and then there's the impact, the cost, the benefit, and then brainstorming followed by action. But what I found to be so unique about this, and Robyn said that this was an addition for our training, and I hope, Robyn, that you will keep that moving forward, was the benefit had two parts. The benefit of getting rid of the problem or solving the problem, as well as the benefit of keeping the problem. And that was really eye-opening. There were some really interesting benefits about keeping a problem. And that made it very interesting when it came time to brainstorm and then move into potential actions. So yeah, PICBA was really, really cool to me, and I plan on continuing to use that. Another part that I found just phenomenal was trauma-informed peer support. I am a person that I really love statistics, and I love logic and reasoning and stuff like that. So when you get into the statistics of trauma in mental health and co-occurring disorders, they're startling. And to have conversations and to see people around the room kind of take in this information and respond to it, as well as myself, it was very, very cool, for lack of a better way to put it. And then we talked about the different health aspects. So, for instance, there were several programs that they talked to us about: the Wellness Recovery Action Planning, the WRAP plan, the Whole Health Action Management, or WHAM, and many of us have had training in some of those. Money Basics, which is, of course, a SAMHSA course. And from this training, we will begin a Money Basics course here in our drop-in center down in Las Vegas, because one of the folks that took the training said, "Oh, what is this Money Basics?" And here I am, someone sitting there with this great knowledge, because I was fortunate enough to be taught Money Basics by Robyn Priest and Danita Diamata a couple of years ago. So that was really cool to have that revisited, and we're going to, like I say, have a running series with that here in our drop-in center. And then one of the other things that just really sung to me in that portion was the new R, and that was the Nutrition and Exercise for Wellness and Recovery. And that was a program that was, I was a participant in the final development and testing process back in 2009. So it was really cool to see that that has finally come to fruition, and that it's being taught as a viable program across the U.S. at least in peer support. So that was really cool to be a part of that. It's a fabulous program. And the fact that in this training we're getting these pieces and we're talking about these things, and we get a chance to really get excited about them and move on and either facilitate, co-facilitate, or get with someone who's trained to facilitate them is really awesome. I think for I had many aha moments throughout the training, but my big aha moment, which I shared with our group, was during the stages of change. And Robyn, do you mind if I share that just a little bit? How am I doing on time? I'm not Robyn. Okay.
Good.
So the stages of change, and I'm sure we've probably all seen them or something similar. It's just kind of a circle. And you have these different stages where when you're presented with a problem or you have something you want to work on, you first are in your pre-contemplation stage, and then you maybe go to contemplation, then you're preparing to make your change, then you have your action, then you're in your maintenance phase, and then you move into recovery, and then it's essentially your maintenance phase. And then at the end is relapse. And I always talk about relapse not being a negative. It is a part of the cycle. But I know myself going through these things, it's also very personal, and it's hard to feel that way about it. And when we were talking about this in class, I went, holy cow, I just realized that I have this big issue, something that I've worked on for a couple of years in my life, really seriously worked on. And I realized that I had gotten myself all the way back to around the wheel. I've relapsed. I've gotten back through into the preparation stage. And I know this. This is information that I know, but I really needed to see it. For some reason, again, maybe it has something to do with the logic for me. But in seeing it, my gears started winding, and it was eye-opening. It was extremely helpful. And in going through it myself, I feel like it just makes me that more effective to work with other people in it. So that was kind of one of my big aha moments, was going through the stages of change. And then I know that Tanya talked about this earlier as well, but we talked an awful lot about person-directed versus enabling. And I tend to be the person who wants to save the world, and I sometimes need to be reminded not to enable. It's not my job to save the world. It's not, I didn't take that on, and I shouldn't be trying to take that on, but I tend to be an enabler. And since the training, I'm catching myself every single day and taking a step back. And even if I've given someone information, let me do that for you. Well, you know what, Jane, let me actually provide the information or show you where to find it instead of making that call or whatever. But I'm catching myself, so that's really, really good. And then, of course, another piece that was really important was self-care, because I think we just forget. I tend to get really caught up in what I'm doing, and I get very involved with my work and outside interests and things like that. And I forget that, hey, I need to take care of myself. And so that reminder was really, really great. The other aha moment that I had, which is interesting, was on biases, and Robyn talked a little bit about the biases. And this was one of those pieces where I had said to her aside, I've had so many cultural sensitivity trainings. I got this one down. And then one of the examples that she used, she said, everybody has biases. It's natural. And of course, I want to sit there and go, no, I'm good. I don't have this problem. And then she said things like, I have a kitten in my right hand and I have a puppy in my left hand. Which do you choose? And it was like, well, most of us naturally chose one or the other. Well, I have a burger and I have a salad. Which do you choose? So it was stuff like that really made us think, now wait a minute, we have biases about everything, so maybe I'm not all where I need to be exactly. So for myself, it was an incredible training, absolutely incredible. And I haven't even touched on the fact that we talked about, the regular clinical model versus the recovery model, and that's just phenomenal. I just can't say enough about this training. I will absolutely be applying to become a facilitator, and hopefully Robyn won't hold it against me that I'm so long-winded. But I just can't say enough about it. It was incredible. It was incredible to watch everyone else around the room grow and share throughout the week. It was really phenomenal to be able to be a part of their lives as they were taking in information, and to learn from not only Robyn and Jamie, who were phenomenal facilitators, but to learn from the other peers in the room as well. So it was a beautiful training. I would not have minded going through the 10-day, but I'm happy to have had the 4.5. So Robyn, is Jamie available at this point?
Jamie is not available. They have moved them to a particular area in town, so she's unable to get on this call. So there's a couple of things I want to say, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. We were talking about money basics earlier, and I want to say Peerlink is funded by SAMHSA, so the Money Basics was developed by funding to Peerlink. So Peerlink were the developers of that, and we do have a facilitator course on that. And I think next month's webinar is actually on Money Basics, so I encourage you to pop on that and hear about that. But it's around financial self-sufficiency, and the way that kind of topic came up a bit more in the training was when we did PICBA, the problem-solving exercise. And PICBA is something that a few people use around the country, but I actually added the piece about what's the benefit to you. It's not in the organic PICBA model because it's not something we ever think about. But the person who allowed themselves to bring their problem forward was about overspending. And as we work through PICBA with that particular person, Money Basics came up from one of the other participants. So they're going to decided that that was one of the things they'd like to do as an action. Couple of other things I just want to mention. When we talk through the stages of change, although the theoretical model talks about a relapse, we're very clear in there that not everyone goes through a relapse. Some people do, some people don't, and it's all good. It's not a bad thing. It's just something we get to learn and grow from. So I just wanted to clarify that. When I was listening to Joanna, I'm like, oh, it sounds like you have to, but you don't have to. One of the other things when we talk about a clinical model on recovery, I know there's a lot of talk about recovery being a model, and I just want to put it out there personally because it's such an individual thing for people. I just think it's recovery. I don't always talk about it in terms of it being a model, and I know some people like to, so I'm just going to add that. And the other piece, one of the pieces that I thought about while Joanna was talking, and that we're always trying to fix things for people. It's really interesting because we had talked on day one through the peer support fundamentals about we're not enabling people, we're not fixing it, we're not there to solve it for them. I love the phrase, I started using it a couple of months ago, we're exploration facilitators, that we allow the people that we work with to explore what they want and what they need, and we're just there to facilitate that. And Joanna actually came in one morning and she had an issue with her car, and it was barely under warranty, and she just needed to vent, and like everyone wanted to fix it. People were like, well, you could do this, and you could take your car here, and you could do da-da-da-da-da. And it was the perfect learning place for people to get that it's natural for us to want to fix it for people. And so it was watching people get that their automatic is fixed. It freed them up for the rest of the training to look at kind of different ways of being. So in terms of like the training itself, Jamie can't be with us, but she is up in North Dakota. She's also a trained navigator for the healthcare marketplace. and she also does stuff with a federation of families. So she's got, like, a few irons in the fire of different things that she's doing. But what we did was, in terms of supporting her, we worked with her prior to the course around what the material was. We've got facilitator notes with the PowerPoints and the process, and then we have her co-facilitate and go through it. So that's the kind of process of growing facilitators and then move through it afterwards. The other piece I want to say is I did tell these guys they could say anything, good, bad, or indifferent about this training. I didn't pay them to say nice things. And, I just asked for people that wanted to kind of talk about this. So although Joanna raved about me, I promise I did not pay her. And I'm more than welcome. If anyone ever does any of the trainings that we're involved in and it doesn't work as well as it could, I'd love to hear from you. So we do have the capacity. We don't always have free trainings available. We can certainly let people know when we do, but we also have the capacity. If there's people out there that want us to run this training and have some funding, we have the capacity to do that. So it's just about contacting Sunny Briscoe, and I've got her, the office number and her email available. And I'm going to leave that slide up because the next slide's just a discussion and questions. But does anyone have any questions for us? I'm looking at the chat at the moment, and there aren't any here. But I'm just going to put it up there and say, any of us would love to answer some questions. We've got a few minutes left. And again, Jamie profusely apologizes for having to run out of the building. Seems weird asking questions and then it's quiet. Okay, we do have a question. Is the Peer Wellness Specialist certification for the US versus just an Oregon certification? So currently the Peer Wellness Specialist certification is in Oregon, but we do have the capacity to see whether it's a possibility in other states. So if you're from another state and you want us to find out whether we can get it certified in your state, just send an email to Sunny, or my email I think is on the front slide too, and the slides will be up on our website. And let us know. The reason why we haven't had it certified in North Dakota or Nevada at the moment is because they currently don't have certification processes for their support workers. But certainly if there's a process in another state, we can look at getting it certified if people are interested. So thanks for that question. Any other questions? Can't have been perfect. Doesn't look like there's any other questions, but here's the other thing. You can send an email to Sunny, you can send an email to me, you can call either of us, and I'm very happy to answer any further questions that you may have. I just want to say thank you to Tanya and Joanna. Tanya stepped up 2 days ago because we didn't think Joanna was going to be able to be on the call, so I want to thank her for that. I do have another question. How do we find courses? In terms of if you're talking about any of the courses that Peerlink run, you can contact Peerlink, and we can certainly let you know what's happening and when they're happening. You can take a look on our website. We'll note if we're doing something anywhere, or you can personally contact me and I'll let you know. Not a problem at all. If you send us an email, we'll get back to you pretty quickly and tell you what's happening. So hopefully that helps that question for you, Bobby. So if there's no other questions, again, email us if you have questions. I'm going to hand it back over to Sunny to close this out. But actually, one thing I do want to say, training peer support workers is like the ultimate privilege. I feel like I've died and gone to heaven and got the job of my dreams because you have people come into training, and as they go through that training, you see the ahas, the movement, the changes, and it is, look, I've actually got goosebumps while I'm talking about it, because it's a privilege to see people learn and grow and be part of that process. And there is not one training that I go through that I don't grow myself in that training, and that is the absolute mutuality of peer support, whether we're delivering it or training it. So, hold on to that, go after it with like gusto and vigor, and I'll now hand it over to Sunny to close us out. So thank you for being part of this.
Alrighty, thank you, Robyn. I just wanted to thank everyone else for attending our webinar today, and it will be available on our website, www.peerlinktac.org, later this week or early next week. We will also have the PDF available of those slides so that you can print those and have those handy. Again, if you wouldn't mind completing a brief survey once this meeting ends, we'd be very appreciative. Thank you and have a great day.
Sunny, are we still on?
I'm here.
Sunny?